Thank you so much for tuning in. This is attorney Matt Wayman here today to chat with you about victims' rights in the state of Missouri. Under Missouri Revised Statute 595.209, all victims of dangerous felonies are automatically granted rights. Today I'm going to chat about 10 of those rights and then talk about what those rights mean in actual practice. The first right is the right to receive information about the ongoing status of the criminal case. What this looks like in practice is a victim's advocate or the prosecuting attorney calling the victim and telling them about the status of that case. The second right that we're going to talk about is the right of the victim to be at any proceeding that the defendant has a right to be at. This would be preliminary hearings, bond hearings, sentencing hearings, or plea hearings. If the defendant has a right to be there, then the victim will also have a right to be there. Generally, the victim and the defendant will not be at counsel status hearings, where just the lawyers get together and apprise the judge as to the status of the case. The third right that we're going to talk about is the right of the victim to be informed in a timely manner of any continuances, of any court dates, or any dispositions to the criminal proceedings. This goes in line with the first right that we talked about, but just spells it out in a little more detail. The fourth right that we're going to talk about is the right of the victim to have a secure waiting room at any criminal proceeding. What this looks like is the victim advocate securing a waiting room for the victim and their family. This is so they don't have to sit around the defendant or the defendant's family or anybody else in that courtroom that they don't feel comfortable with. They're allowed to have a waiting room outside where they can wait for the criminal proceeding to start. The fifth right that we're going to talk about is the right of the victim to be informed of the procedure for applying for and receiving witness fees. If the court authorizes those fees, the victim must be informed of that procedure that they can apply for and receive those fees. The sixth right that we're going to talk about is the right of victims to receive restitution. Under Missouri law, victims are entitled to restitution. This varies among different courts. So if you're a victim, you can speak to a victim's advocate about the process and procedure for applying for and receiving any restitution. The seventh right victims have under Missouri law is the right to participate in the criminal proceedings without being discharged or disciplined by their employer. Employers cannot fire or discipline an employee for exercising their rights under Missouri law, especially when they're victims in cases. The eighth right that victims have under Missouri law is the right to appear at any sentencing hearing and make an oral statement or provide a written victim's impact statement. This statement can include what the victim wants to happen in regards to a sentencing decision, but at the end of the day, the judge does not have to follow that recommendation of the victim. The ninth right that victims have is the right to be informed if the defendant is released from custody, if the defendant escapes custody, or if the defendant dies while in custody. The last right that we're going to talk about is the right of the victim to be given information about being notified of any post-conviction proceedings. The last thing I want to say about victims' rights is that while prosecuting attorneys do take into account what the victim wants as a resolution to the case, they don't always just have to honor that. If the victim wants 5 years and the prosecutor does not think that the case is worth 5 years or that there's other circumstances in regards to this case that warrant a sentence below 5 years, they're allowed to offer that sentence. At the end of the day, prosecuting attorneys do not represent victims. They represent the state of Missouri and the interests of the people of the state of Missouri. So if they want to offer something lower, they're allowed to do that. I hope this video has been good to give you insights into kind of how victims' rights work in the state of Missouri. If you got any other questions, please comment down below or reach out directly. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. We're going to be back soon with more videos.